he was an architect, had a great career. But when I was young, he had a heart attack when we were playing basketball. And he went inside and he died in our house, and paramedics came and I saw him getting rolled out, and he was gone.
What's going on, guys? So on today's show, we have Bryan Dunn from W.E. O'Neill. Bryan, I believe you're president of the company,
right.
the Arizona division, right? Mm-hmm. Well, welcome to the show, Bryan.
Thank you for having me here. It's fantastic to finally meet you in person. I've actually listened to your podcast before, so it's nice to actually sit in the seat now.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. So, Bryan, you're killing it. You're running the company. We do some work with you guys, and I just been following you, on social media. You post a lot of things, especially particular to your company. So I gravitate to some of that stuff because it shows me that you're a loyal person, and because you're pushing the narrative of where you're at. You know what I mean? Yeah. Some people push different narratives and different things. They don't know what they're doing, but I'm like, this guy's about his company and his position. So I value that, and that's why I was like, I got to get him on the show. So appreciate that. So you've been with the company 5.5 years, married.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Children?
4 children.
4 children. Yep. Are they all in the house still?
So I have one who's moved out.
Okay.
So daughter who's 20, a son who's 18. He's going to ASU downtown.
Yeah.
And then a son who's 15 and a daughter who is 12.
So the 20-year-old moved out already?
Yep. She already moved out and she's doing her thing.
She's just on her. She's like, I'm going to be on my own.
Yeah. She bounced out pretty quick. She did community college for a while and decided to take a gap. And I think that gap has gone on to her a couple more.
The gap turned into freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. But she's working hard and she's doing her thing. So
you know what? Sometimes it's good for the kids, the youngsters, to go on their own. Because like we tend to spoil them, and then they don't grow as fast. So she's going to get some lumps and bruises, but she's probably going to grow a little faster.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's how a lot of us, we got thrown out there and right into the mix. And there's a lot of times where I share the stories of just the grind, not having enough money to figure out, okay, hey, should I go out or am I gonna have to pay for groceries?
Yeah.
And it's real. Like, I was at one point I was delivering pizzas. I was when I was going to college, and I was delivering pizzas. I was a personal trainer. I was doing work for my dad, who's an architect, and just did all I could just so I could try to make enough money so I could spend $100 in groceries for a month.
Yeah, it's crazy because today's world it's not that same way. No. I'm 43, and I think I was blessed to grow up in an old school setting, with people that still valued hard work. A little bit different, there was the social media wasn't the same and stuff like that. So there are better things today than there were then. But that hard work ethic, even as I was coming up in construction, I worked with some really hardcore guys. It was still the era where they were throwing stuff across the building. They cussed you out. I was in that era. I was at the end of it. I came in 1998. It was like the end of that. But I got to feel it, and I got to like chase it, and and it was like, okay, well, this guy's it's just part of the job. He's cussing at me. Cool. Mm-hmm. He's not trying to punch me. Yeah. And he's throwing stuff and missing me on purpose. You know what I mean? Yeah. So so I'm just going to do what he says and not try to fight him and just learn as much as I can.
Yeah. That was actually how one of my first jobs, I worked for J.E. Dunn in Kansas City. Okay. And, I was a field engineer, and on the job site, it was back, the superintendent, everybody smoked in it wasn't even a trailer. It was one of those job offices inside of a building. Mm-hmm. So no ventilation whatsoever. Yeah. The foreman meetings were just smoke billowing out. And, but man, the superintendent I had, he'd chew your ass, and it was for sport. And, but you realize that, he never made it personal, but it was just the way he knew how to do things. That's how he came up. Mm-hmm. And so it's it is fascinating. I mean, it was kind of the same time that you and I were coming up, and those same tools and the same things that got them there no longer work.
No.
And, this day and age, that idea of being able to go yell at somebody or try to, motivate them, you have to understand their language. You have to understand what motivates them and speak to them as, with respect. Otherwise they vote with their feet, and I think that's one thing that I think is great about, where the industry is going. So many people complain about this next generation. They roll their eyes and they're like, oh, this generation sucks.
Yeah.
And I hear it all the time, but the question is, who's going to capture that? Who's going to understand how to actually connect with that group and really take that and move it forward? Because, I'll go to, the ABA and the word, Gen Xers, and everybody starts laughing, but it's the same generation 20 years ago that laughed about our generation.
Yeah.
So, it's the tools that we have at our, that are available now for us as leaders it's totally different than how we came up.
Yeah. It's funny because I was listening to something, but you're right. Because the baby boomers, I'm a Gen X kid, and I don't know what's today. What are they? Gen Zs, Gen Ys, something, whatever. The baby boomers were concerned about the Gen X's, and like you said, it goes on. I think it stopped after Gen X. Like no one else cared after that. No one's concerned about no one after. But it's true though, because even though it's we could say, well, it was hardcore back then, which it was, right? And so it just looks different, right? And the way we compete looks different. Back then it was like you can, I would literally race people in the industry, cuss at them, let's go, you this and that, and then that was that's how you created the competition. Yeah. And it's like, all right, you're calling me out, all right, let's do this, right? However that looked, right? Whether it was legal, illegal, whatever the competition was, right? Yeah. So today it's like, okay, well, how can we figure out how to get people to compete in a different setting? And that's where you're saying is it's not the same. And so a lot of people haven't been able to tap into that, especially when you put in the change of the environment, you put in the social media, COVID threw a monkey wrench because that changed the way everyone worked and where they worked from. So now it's like, okay, how do we get people to actually compete on a different level and build their will, the fortitude, what's inside them, without having the old school tactics, right? And so I really don't know that answer. I mean, we hear all kinds of things, right? But I mean, are they all true? Because I guess it depends what industry.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
It's interesting. In our company and just in my career, I've been hyper focused on strength-based leadership. And so there's a book, Strength Finders. And it's something that it goes back. I was telling you about my brother earlier. He was a pastor at the time. And I was having a conversation with him early in my career. And I told him, hey, look, I'm trying to focus on rounding out my, weaknesses. And so like I had talked about is I was studying leadership books and trying to focus on I could improve what I was weak at. And he was like, man, that sucks. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, what, you're going to focus so hard on being mediocre.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right. And he said, no, what you need to do is like pour into your strengths, just double down into what you're great at. And at the time I'm kind of like, what am I great at? Because, when you're early in your career, you haven't really become an expert at anything.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to distill what is that you're great at. And so I started looking at trends. I started asking people like, hey, what do you recognize that I'm great at? And it was interesting, things like strategy were the things that were just kind of this common denominator for me. And I see strategy everywhere, and it was even when I was a kid, like reading the box scores, for, in the newspaper, people actually used to do that. And, I would study, baseball and free agency and, all those things. And I found myself just studying strategy and not even knowing it. And so I came across this book, Strength Finders, and, it's a 10-minute survey, and suddenly it gives you what your 5 strengths are. And not only does it give you that, but it also says, hey, here's how you show up, and you can read into it. And so over the last, about 14 years, when I took over, I used to run Adolphson and Peterson construction. one of the first things I did was I just rolled out that everybody got the Strength Finders book. Nice. And
that was here?
Yeah, that was here. And then even with W. O'Neill, everybody who comes on board, they get that book because instead of identifying where people are weak and where they're lacking, think about a performance review.
Okay.
Nobody wants to do a performance review. But if you're able to talk about the things that they're strong and where their strengths are, it changes things because it's like, hey, how do we know you're going to be not exceptional here and that's okay, but you're great here. Here's what we need in our organization. And so that's some of the stuff that, I get really passionate about because I think that, with strengths, it suddenly everything becomes easier because, so for interestingly enough, when we were talking about competition, this all loops around one way or the other.
Yeah.
But competition used to be really high as one of my top strengths. I was the last of 5 kids, grew up playing sports, win at all cost. I mean, my dad actually bought us boxing gloves. So, we would just be able to take out our frustrations on each other. And then after a while, we just started bringing in kids in the neighborhood and we do fight nights.
Nice.
So, those are the things that, so I had to learn that even though I was hyper competitive, that win at all cost only got me to so far, And so it was finally I had to realize, okay, well, if I'm going to grow as a leader, what are those strengths? And so that's where, strategy was one of those things that I just started investing in heavily, and all the way to getting a chance I read almost every book.
Strategy?
Oh yeah. And there was several that were, people from, who study and teach at Harvard University. And so I had the opportunity to actually go do an executive education at Harvard on their campus and have those instructors teach. And I had people saying, well, why would you do that? You're already great at strategy. And I was like, well, yeah, but if you want to be exceptional at it, then you have to listen to and you surround yourself around exceptional people.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, I love it. And I mean, just tying it back in, like you said, that's a good way to work with today's group of people, the kids, the Gen Ys, the Gen Zs, all those are millennials, whatever there are, because we tend to, as people, fault everyone. What are you doing wrong?
Yeah,
you didn't do this. We do it with our kids. We do it at work. We do it everywhere. The blame game, right? So I like that you're saying, like, let's build a strategy. Let's build a strategy to find the strengths, right? And so I'm thinking about it right now as you're saying it. I'm like, I'm thinking about my team. Like I'm literally going to start implementing this because I'm missing some tools here, and I think this is one. I think you're here for a reason. I swear to God. I don't swear to God because people are like, why is he swearing to God? Well, I just did. Sorry. But it's that if we can find their strengths, instead of, because we're always like, well, you messed up. Oh, it's his fault. It's his fault, her fault, whatever, right? And if I can build the strengths, now we can know where those people belong.
Absolutely.
If they even belong, right?
Well, and that is a good question, because one of the things that we also do is when we look at interviewing candidates and onboarding them, we do this thing called predictive index, and it's called the PI, but it's a 5-minute survey that somebody takes. It's uncannily accurate. And so what we discovered is coupling Strength Finders and having the PI results, suddenly you can see, really what the makeup is on what a person is. And so it's great to know yourself, right? But what we started doing is sitting down with our teams. So think about every project, you put different people. So like, we have to put a project manager, a superintendent, a project engineer. They have to work with our project executive, our director of operations. There'll be a transition from pre-con, and there's all these different personalities involved.
Yeah.
And you expect every single time they're going to mesh and they're going to work. And then you have a client who has different ideas and different, approaches. And then you throw an architect in the mix.
Yeah.
So every time that dynamic changes. And so what we're starting to do is say, let's recognize this. And we sit down and say, as a team, this is where everybody's showing up. And so if we have 2 drivers, a PM and a superintendent, who are just off the charts, A-type personalities, we better bring somebody in there who's really good at integrating and listening, And so what we do is we have to customize how our approach, and it's also based on the client. If a client, there's certain people who just don't fit certain clients.
Yeah, if they're too aggressive for the client or something like that.
So it really is curtailing a team that can really be a high performing team each time they go out. And what we recognize is sometimes we'll look at a team and say, that's not going to work, even though it fits on a bar chart.
Yeah.
And you have to deal with manpower.
Yeah.
That's one of the most frustrating things because it changes daily. But sometimes we have to say, no matter what, this client deserves this superintendent because we want an exceptional experience.
So PI, predictive index, is that similar to a DISC, like a DISC?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I think we've done those.
Yep.
I was just telling my wife yesterday, she didn't do it, but she doesn't listen to this. You didn't do it. But I was like, let's give everyone a DISC test, but maybe I'll look at this instead, because just to see where they're at. And people change, I think. Like some people are growing into becoming better. Some people are growing into becoming worse. Some people ain't growing at all. Yep. So it's good that I think every year or maybe 6 months, like you're saying, to evaluate where are you actually at. And not only that, it's what's going on in your life, because that can change your thought process and your belief, everything at that time. You know what I mean? What's going,
100%.
Are you going through a divorce? Are you going, are you super happy and getting married, and are you just dating and you're in this honeymoon stage or whatever, and you're happy now, but you were mad like 3 months ago for 6 years, So I like that you're doing, checking a team, pairing them up, I think we can do that everywhere though. I think young adults can do that with dating, like find the right person. You tend to find the wrong person and you think you're stuck with them forever because, the Bible says that, but, now you're forcing some situation or something, starting to pop out kids and you don't even know who the person is.
Yeah. My wife and I talk about that sometimes. Yeah. So we're both, I was divorced and she was widowed. And so, we were married. It's almost 5 years. Coming up here in a couple weeks.
Got a new position and a new wife.
Oh, absolutely.
Life's good.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, being an adult, and not in my 20s, I made that lifestyle decision.
Yeah.
But being in my 40s and making that decision, it's a whole different decision on who you want to be with and what their values are. And that's one thing. I married, absolutely, my soulmate. She's incredible. Nice. And interestingly enough, there's a kind of a backstory. So we worked together for when we both worked at Kitchell.
Okay.
And we had she was the head of all of HR for the company, and for me, I was in Kitchell Construction, and there was this lady who worked within the company, and she used personality assessments, and she would say, so it was called the Hogan assessment, and it's a really they drill deep into personalities and whatnot, and so I ended up taking it, and it takes about almost 2 hours to take the whole entire assessment. Wow. And the first thing she said, do you know Nicole? And I said, barely, I know she's in the company. She's like, you need to get to know her because you're the male equivalent of her. And I was like, that's interesting. And, didn't think much about it, because, the way that company's set up, there's like multiple, I think 4 or 5 different companies within Kitchell. So,
yeah.
Still didn't really get a chance to, get to know her much. And then it was, the CEO had actually asked her to get to know me better because I was supposed to be taking over one of the companies. And so her and I sat down and got to know each other. And ironically enough, it was, we had to make a decision if we were going to stay in the company and be together or stay in the company and not be together, or actually leave the company and be together. And, so we were given that option and we both said, we're out. So, it was the best decision I ever made because after that, we were married within a year after that. And I have, 2 step kids who are, they're my own kids now. And that's why I say 4 kids.
They're the younger ones?
No, we're totally blended family.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. So there's 4 total?
4 total.
And what the age groups from her? Which ones are
So
they?
hers a girl who's 12, and then a son who's 18.
Yeah.
And then my son is 15,
Oh, so
and
like
my daughter is
mixed in.
18. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the Brady Bunch for sure.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
Wasn't easy, but
Was that so? Both of you guys are from out of state?
Yeah. So she was from Ohio, and she's a Buckeye through and through.
Okay.
She actually went to school there, but she's from Ohio. And then I was born in Nebraska, was there for about 10 years. And then my family moved to northern Colorado in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Yeah.
And grew up there and ended up going to school at Colorado State there.
Where you got Ketchel here or in another state?
Here.
And so are you guys working together again? Is she working at W.E. O'Neill as well?
Oh, no. So what, she's actually, she went and worked with another company for a while and then had an opportunity. She just now gets the chance to be the CEO of our family.
Oh, that's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
Because you still have a couple young ones, 3 of them in the household.
Yeah.
So you got to watch them all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so someone's got to do it.
Absolutely. But, the great thing about it is she's, from a business acumen and understanding, when you are an executive in HR, and she's overseen companies like Eddie Bauer. Yeah. So and things like Brio restaurants, and so she's been an executive for high performing companies.
Big corporations.
Yeah. So the conversations that we have is completely different than what probably most people's pillow talk is. Mm-hmm. But she challenges me, and she understands what the things I'm going through on a day-to-day basis. And it's just incredible that she's not only, the love of my life, but she's also, truly a support, that I have that, and that's why she's just, I consider myself truly lucky and fortunate that I don't know how I was able to have her in my life. Actually, I can tell you if you want to know.
Let's do it.
All right. So, do you know who Paulo Coelho is?
No.
He's a writer, and I had this therapist I was working with after my divorce, and she kept on saying, you need to read The Alchemist, and The Alchemist is a book that you just have to read. And I was like, yeah. I'm going through a divorce, and it wasn't something that I sat out to have a divorce. It just came upon me, I guess we can say. We'll leave it at that. But, I was really closed off. I wasn't going to have relationships after that. I was just, I said, hey, for the next couple of years, I'm just going to not. And she said, the therapist kept saying, nope, you need to put yourself out there. And I still wouldn't. And, but she kept on saying, read a book. And I took my daughter to Chicago to go see Hamilton. And we were at the airport, and that book was sitting on just a pile of, like on this book.
There?
It was just sitting there. And I was like, oh man, I was like, fine, I'll read The Alchemist, right? I guess I have to.
Yeah.
I finished it on the way home.
Nice.
And, the big takeaway is, if you put your intention in the universe, or if you put your intention in the world, the universe will conspire to make it happen.
Yeah.
And, so it was interesting so I actually went away for, a long weekend, and I just kind of wanted to reset and figure out, hey, what is important in my life? Mm-hmm. What are the things that I truly want to do moving forward? And what I discovered was what I was doing professionally wasn't where I wanted to be. What I discovered personally, it wasn't where I wanted to be. And so I just spent time in this cabin just writing. And I finally came across to the opportunity to write about what kind of person I'd want in my life. Mm-hmm. And I started writing, and I laughed. I was like, this is ridiculous. What I'm asking for is not achievable. It's not going to happen. And so, but I said, okay, I got to kind of finish writing it out. And so I finished writing, and basically I, wrote this person that I didn't think that would ever exist.
Yeah.
And, about 6 months later, we went out to lunch, and it was...
That she was right there the whole time?
It was crazy. Yeah. And so the wild thing is everything that I put out in the universe and asked for, I got.
Yeah.
Professionally, family with, and then finding her and, 2 remarkable kids. I mean, they're just the most incredible kids too. So it's, don't be afraid to ask the world, for what you want, and make sure to dream big.
Yeah.
Because, last thing you want to do is dream small and have it happen.
Yeah.
So, and that's, was kind of the really cool story about it is that if I didn't go away, or if I didn't read that book, or if I didn't go see a therapist, none of that would have all transpired. And I could have been just bitter and angry, and I could have just been a victim of my circumstances. Yeah. And so it's amazing how one decision that you make can lead to a whole other series of decisions.
What's the like changing 1 degree? Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like you made that decision, and you're saying the world. Like in my world, I would say God. You know what I mean? You don't go to church, huh? Do you go to church?
No, I don't belong to an active church.
Yeah, and so it's all meant to be, right? Because if in the Bible it would say write it down, make it plain. Yep. Because everything you say is a prayer, however that looks, because it's going out into the world, it's going out into the universe. I mean, think about like if we want to get into like science and stuff, your ears start ringing. Oh, someone's talking about me, because it's like if your phone can send a signal and words over this airways, why can't anything else send over airways?
Oh, absolutely.
Everything's out there, right? And so it's picked up, and a lot of times people don't pick it up, you know. So you know you are already in that path, and I love that story because it shows that one is you're willing to open up, and so many people are not willing to open up, right? And so and then you went to go get help, which so many people aren't willing to go get help because they're too ashamed of it. You know what I mean? And then you've seen the book and you're like, okay, there's something with this, you know. Again, people miss that, you know, and so many people, you know, you hear those stories where like, and I'm going to say it wrong, but you hear like those stories where like, someone was praying, they're like, God, send me this. And he sent like 3 people and they didn't even recognize it. You know, you hear those.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, and that's like, that happens a lot. Right, we ask for all these things. We want help. We want money. Whatever. I'm saying we in general as people, but then we miss it. You know. So thank God you didn't miss it, because you wouldn't have this big old smile on your face when you're talking about your wife. Same thing for me. You know, I've been married like 15 years, and it's the same thing. As you know, I prayed about it. I put it like I created a dream board, a vision board, reality board, whatever you want to call them. And I put her picture on it right when I met her. Like I got her picture from someone else. Actually, I drew her. She has curly hair, and I drew like this head with like curly hair as like a comic thing. And then I was able to get a picture of her, and I was like, you know, and I'm like, Felicia would become my wife, and this and that, same thing. And I put it out there, and I'm like, okay. And I was just getting into church, so I didn't know what was right or wrong, and I still don't. But it was like like you said, it's you put it out there, and you know, and if it's, you know, meant to be, it'll latch on, you know, because at the same time, her mind had to be in the same place.
Absolutely.
You know, because it couldn't have been just you, right? It's the same thing with my wife, and we're both in our second marriage, and it's the same thing. We're kind of looking for something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, in saying that about prayer. You know, the things that, you know, I pray about is, it's not my laundry list of the things that I want, tangible items, you know, hey,
it shouldn't be.
Get me these things. You know, it is a really simple prayer, but it's about, you know, being open to the world of possibilities, you know, and, you know, giving me strength, giving me courage, you know, to do the right thing, but being open to be able to recognize when people come into your lives, and, you know, just having that. And so I think that I look at is, you know, faith is different for everybody.
Yeah.
You know, my mom was a devout Catholic, you know, so, you know, she could, you know, she had her prayer beads, and, you know, she was hardcore.
She had candles and wax and all kinds of stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my dad was as well. And interestingly enough, is my dad actually had the afterlife experience. So he was an architect, you know, had a great career, and but when I was young, he had a heart attack when we were playing basketball, and he went inside, and he died in our house, and paramedics came, and I saw him getting rolled out, you know, and he was gone. And so he tells a story about where he was laying, he laid on the bed, and he could see himself.
Oh, wow.
And then he started, you know, kind of rising up, and then he started talking about that tunnel and the light, and he was going toward the light, and he was just like, he's like, oh crap. He said, quote, you know, Dunn, you died.
Yeah.
And he realized, he was like, I can't die yet. Like I there's still so much I have to do. And he kept going toward the light, and he could see, figure out ahead of him. And he was saying, I'm just not ready yet. I can't. And suddenly he stopped and got pulled back, and they had the paddles on him.
They're like, let's go, keep going, keep going.
Yeah.
It's crazy because those, like, when people get to those life experiences, they all say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what makes me think it's real. You know what I mean?
Well, the other thing that's interesting about it is that even that night he was in the hospital, and he was, he had sold his business before, but through a divorce, he was pretty much, he realized he was worth more dead than alive. And he actually was feeling sorry for himself. He's like, why did I say I should, the kids would have been better off without me. Mm. And which couldn't have been further from the truth. I'm incredibly close, or was incredibly close with my dad. Right. He passed away during COVID.
Sorry about that.
No, he was, what was it, 90 years old?
Oh, long
so
life.
Yeah, so
long
lived
life.
a long life. But but the interesting thing was when he was laying there, he talked about a nurse holding his hand all night. And he wanted to thank the nurse afterwards, and they're like, there was no nurse. Mm-hmm. There's nobody who could stay in the ICU all night and hold your hand. And so, those kind of stories has made an impact on me, because when he came back, he was 55 years old. And so he had, another 35 years on this earth, knowing that he was on borrowed time. Mm. And he was able, and he rebuilt his life. He got remarried, found the love of his life. She became my stepmom. And I was getting in a lot of trouble when I was young. You and I think have a little bit of the same background. Is I definitely got in trouble when I was in junior high and parts of high school, and so I had to move in with my dad. But having something that was stable and consistent, made all the difference. So him making that conscious decision to stay, get married, completely changed the trajectory of my life.
Yeah, it showed you how to have a family.
Absolutely.
Even in the worst case, like a second time and rebuilding, and those things are crucial.
Yeah, because I lost my mom when I was 16. Oh, wow. When I was in high school. So that was the other thing, is just having to unpack all that, mm-hmm. But to be able to have a great family environment and where I could thrive. Whereas like my best friend, he didn't have that. He had a mom, but his dad walked out early. Yeah, and we kind of adopted him as kind of as a son, or for me it was a brother, but a son for my dad. But his absence of having a father and an active father, made a huge impact on him. And so, but now he's doing well. He's got kids, and he's a great father, and great best friend.
That's cool. He was a fighter.
Yep.
So you got the work. You're married. How do you balance, like, how do you get that work-life balance for people listening? Is because I have a hard time with this. Like you said, you got a blended family, 5 years now. You're the president of a company. You're basically acting as an owner. You're not acting. You're basically the owner without being the owner. Mm-hmm. You probably even have profit sharing and stuff. I don't know what you guys are doing.
We're 100% ESOP.
Yeah, so there it is. So you are an owner.
We are.
You're running the state division, and how do you get that work-life balance going? Just for the listeners, maybe give them some nuggets on that, how you do it.
I love the question, because it's something I just actually shared with our whole entire company. Wow. And so I did a training, and it was all about work-life balance. And ironically enough, it's a class that I've been teaching work-life balance for the Arizona Builders Alliance for, I think, about the last 8 or 9 years. Okay. And it's for their leadership development forum. And the ironic thing is, the first time that they asked me, it was just me having lunch, and I was asked that same exact question: is, well, what do you do? How do you manage it? And so I just explained what I did, and she's like, you have to teach that class. And I was like, I don't have there's no curriculum for that. And she's like, I know, but like us growing up, nobody talked about work-life balance, and the reality is, I've concluded that it's a fallacy, that work-life balance can't truly exist. Okay. It's the integration of work and life that can work. And so say, for example, you love what you do. So is it really work? And for me, so much of what I do is an extension of myself. But I do have to turn it off, and I do have to, so when I do work, I put myself into it. But when I stop, I make sure that the people around me know that I'm there and I'm actually attentive and being a part of them. But you realize that it's not. People think like 50-50 with work-life balance. It's like well, we work 8 hours a day, hypothetically.
Yeah.
8 hours we sleep, and then 8 hours that we have other things to do. But it doesn't work that way, And so I think that for me, work-life balance comes to understanding like what are the things that make you come alive. What are the things that that bring out the best in you. And so for me, I invest a lot of my time with my family. We love to travel, and over the last few years, some people have hobbies. Our VP of Operations, Jay, he loves the sand dunes and he's hardcore into that. And for us, we like to travel. And so, last year we went to Europe. Nice. And, did, the Paris thing and went to Amsterdam and Norway and Belgium and then Iceland.
Did you take a train? How'd you get around?
So we flew into Paris and then spent some time in Paris and then went into England and then caught a cruise and then hit every port.
Oh, nice.
And so,
okay.
But like this upcoming year, I turned 50 years old. And so we're going to go back to Paris and then hit south of France and then go to Italy. But we're spending more time in certain areas and just renting like a villa and stuff and just spending time, just kind of immersing ourselves in that culture. And so, for me, it's not material things that I care about. I've gotten to that point where, you're not the car you drive, as Tyler Jordan said, you're not the contents of your wallet. You're not your khakis. I look at it as it's all about experiences, and it drives my kids crazy. They're trying to figure out what to get me for Christmas. And I'm like, an experience, and it could be just taking me to Topgolf or let's go out and go to Starbucks. That's all I want is just, time and to be able to spend time with them.
I like that. The experience, like, what do I want? I want an experience. I want to travel more too. And I'm not a big, like the podcast is my hobby. I've never rode in a sand dune buggy or I've never even been on a jet ski. So I've never rode a bike or, anything like that. So I'm not like a material type guy like that either. And it's just what I told my wife. I want to travel. I want to travel 2-3 trips a year, at least one big family trip. At the very least, one big family trip and one big trip, you and I.
Yeah.
Very least. Yep. And so we try it. We were doing it a little bit. We do a little bit, then we get back to one trip maybe, or, like we were going to go to Florida for New Year's, and she was like, well, should we cancel? I'm like, well, whatever you want to do. So she canceled it. I had bought the tickets already. But, or we'll try to go to New York. We haven't been out of the country yet, but I like she's calling right here. But I like the experience. Yeah, because it's the same thing as I don't need anything, so it's not like, what are you going to buy me, a pair of shoes or, out at the house, I'll try to, or wherever we're at, I'll start taking pictures and video recording and I'm like, I'm going to savor this memory, guys, because you're going to be older. We're all going to be older. And let's document this. You know what I mean? So they're like, oh, there's Dad again. He's recording. And they're already, my kids are getting older already. And, so I'm just recording. They're laughing. And, because that's like you said, that's the experience at that moment, and for me, I want to savor that, even though they think I don't care. But I'm the one recording, and I'm like, because I love that they're laughing, they're joking around her, and my 3 daughters, they'll do like dances together, and one's 14, 18, and 20.
Okay.
And they'll do dances together, and like or Just Dance or whatever, and they do these moves. They'll put them on TikTok and stuff, and I'll start recording them because they're just having fun, and the fact that they're having fun makes me happy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And the thing that's great about that is, I'm the same one as I try to film it, take pictures. And I think that there's so much in our life, like if our life is a book is a metaphor for our life, is, you have different chapters in your book. And, one thing that's nice is, a chapter can be, when you look at, 5 years and of working, kind of doing the same thing, it's hard to differentiate, what happened in 2000 and, 15 versus 2018. But when you start looking at experiences, when you look at, places you've traveled, things you've done, or things, you've done with your family, then it really, you can start tracing back and say, oh yeah, you really remember. It's almost like an anchor of what is important. And that's one of the things that we've been doing is having our kids go with us on all, so we did a trip through the Caribbean and did a cruise through the Caribbean. We've gone through Mexico. And, when I was a kid, I never left the country. My big trip was San Diego, and that was it for and I was 17 years old. But it's good because now our kids are asking for experiences. Yeah. They don't really care about the material things anymore. And so, it's nice because we're giving in those experiences because, and I always say I'd rather spend the money up front and let you have those experiences the rest of your life than you getting an inheritance down the line and then saying finally go do something.
Yeah, I think you're exposing them to different things that they would never see, and that way they can know to like them or not to like. It's kind of like when I first tried sushi. I was exposed to. I'm like, man, I like it. Before I never tried it, I didn't like it like everyone else. Huh? The exposure is so cool. And like you and myself is if we can expose our children or even other people around us to a better way of living or better things like, hey, you can have this, you can do this, you can go there. I tell people all the time, because my wife loves New York, like loves New York. New York and San Diego.
What is it about New York she loves?
Fast pace. We're both like fast. We're not really like beach type people. We're both fast paced. Not even the shopping. We're because when we go, we've went 3 or 4 times now. It's we go to like the rough areas to eat but it's fast paced. It's just different type of personality there. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of how we are. We're go. But if we can show hey, here's what you can do. So I tell people, I'm like they don't know what to do, where to go, and they just want to drive to California all the time. And I'm like, hey, New York's super cheap, guys. I mean, the tickets are like a normal ticket's like $400. If you can get it within 2 months, you're gonna pay I've got them for like $375. I don't fly expensive. I can't afford it.
I'm Southwest, man.
Yeah. So like $400, $450, you're going to New York, and I'm like $200. You're gonna get a hotel, $250. You don't need to go freaking stay at the Trump Towers or something crazy, Waldorf or something, and I tell people like you can go experience things for a set price if you choose to. You just got to go and put yourself out there and look, but they're not exposed to it, so it's like what you don't know, so I try to tell people, hey, you can go here, you can go there, you can go, and people will talk about trips or something that never went anywhere. And I'm like, okay, here's what happens when you go to Hawaii. Here's what this costs. Here's what Florida costs. Here's what New York costs. And my end result is New York is cheaper than all three, like out of those three when I go,
That's interesting.
For me,
yeah.
Have you been to New York?
I have.
For me, it's cheaper. Yeah. Now I went and did stayed in a big place and stuff. But like our first couple times, we had to go on a budget, me and my wife and myself.
My best friend and I, we went out to New York. He was at a kind of a crisis in his career. He was doing something he hated. And it was interesting. Actually, we were coming back from the airport. He picked me up and I was like, hey, how's work? And he's like, I fucking hate it. Sorry.
No, you're good.
And I was like, wow. Yeah. And he goes, no, and he starts explaining why. And I was like, all right, let's do a hypothetical. If you had $10 million and you could live off of interest, 4% interest, so $400,000 a year, what would you do? And he goes, I'd open a boxing gym. So, well, that's specific. And I was like, wow. And I was like, why? And so he started explaining it to me, and he just lit up. He was just like happy, passionate about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, you don't need $10 million to do that, right? And he's like, I know. And he came up with all these different excuses. So we started talking about this, and I said, hey, how about this? Let's go to New York, and because he kept on talking about rumble boxing and box and flow and all these different like concepts, George Foreman's, boxing, and that whole concept of, boxing for fitness. And so we ended up doing that. And so we were ballers on a budget. You know, we were, you know, it wasn't nice. You know, we went to some of the grimy places in New York.
Yeah.
But what I'll tell you is you know, for us, he would never have, you know, been able to take. And so what we ended up doing is we hit all these different places and we left, and he had this vision of what he wanted to be. And so I was able to help him invest into starting his boxing gym.
Nice.
And it's cool because he's taken it and he's run with it, and he is, you know, he's doing remarkable things. I mean, he's done TED Talks, you know,
wow.
and, you know, and his idea is, it's called Beautifully Savage. And it's the idea is that fighting solves everything.
Okay.
And, you know, we've been trained that fighting, you know, we're not supposed to fight. You know, people are like, hey, you shouldn't be fighting. But it's like, no, the things that, you know, there's things in our life that we should be fighting for.
That's
you know,
exactly right.
Our friends, our relationships, you know, the things that are important to you. And at all costs, you should fight for those things.
You should fight.
And so he started this gym, and it's still, you know, doing well. And, you know, but it's neat because you know, we set out on a goal, but he's impacted so many different people's lives through it. And, you know, it's really neat. And now he does motivational speaking, coaching.
All based off of fighting?
That's where it all started.
Yeah.
And then, but now it's like his, you know, he does things where it allows him to be able to use that as kind of the base, but then, you know, help, you know, men who are in crisis or, you know, young kids, you know, and like when I went to one of the events, you know, just a couple years ago, and one of his longtime people came up to me and he just thanked me. He's like, you know, hey, thanks for helping, you know, him, you know, Joe get everything, you know, started, because he goes, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Joe. I would have killed myself.
Wow.
And I was just like, okay. And so he just poured out his heart, and he just said, like, this is where I was, and this place saved my life. And, you know, I walk away being like, wow, one person, you know, one impact.
That's
you
all. And that, I mean, that's huge, because that's what we should be trying to do, is impacting someone.
Yeah.
You know, and I think sometimes we impact people outside of our families more so, because sometimes our families we all take each other for granted. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I'm glad you took them. You're like, hey, let's go to New York. Let's go. You know, yeah, because it's like, it doesn't take a lot to show someone their dream, you know, or to realize, like, man, I could be doing this, I could be doing that. If we get past the fear, you know what I mean? Because we're all worth more. You know, we're all valuable. We all have skill sets and traits that are incomparable, that, you know, these things we're born with, and we just, so many people don't tap into them, you know, and you know, so like for myself, that's the whole thing with this podcast, besides being able to have conversations, but it's showing people, hey, you can be just like Bryan Dunn. He messed up a few times. He got a divorce. He remarried. He's living his best life now. And so can you, right? And that's what that's why I did this, is to show people, like, hey, if I can do it, so can you. And if my guest can do it, so can you. But especially me, because I only went to 1 month of high school, you know, not
really?
even. Yeah. I was expelled from all high schools. You know, I was really bad.
How many?
No, one time I was expelled from all.
All.
Yeah, I got in a fight with a teacher.
Oh. And
that was it. I got charged. You know, I got an assault charge. So I think I was 15. Maybe I got charged by the time I was 16 or something like that. By the time it went through.
And just blackballed from there.
No high school wanted me. Nope. No high school. I went to an alternative school for like a few weeks, maybe a month. There was only 2 in the state. They kicked me out immediately. And then I ended up going to Phoenix Job Corps. That's where I went. Phoenix Job Corps is like federal trade school, to carpentry. Got a GED there. I stopped learning, Brian. I stopped learning at 7th grade. I was really smart. I was a really smart kid. I'm still smart. I'm smart, right?
Absolutely.
But like education wise, I was like the smartest kid around everybody. But I also grew up bad. So I knew all the bad things. I liked the bad things. And in 7th grade, I decided, well, I'm going to start doing drugs. Right. I was already sniffing pain and smoking weed and drinking in 5th and 6th grade. 7th grade, it went hardcore. And then that's when I stopped learning. So I stopped opening the textbooks. 8th grade, I didn't do one assignment. Really my education, my formal education stopped in the 7th grade.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was promoted to high school. I wasn't allowed to, on my 8th grade graduation. I was promoted at high school because the principal, he believed in me. He was one of the only ones. I kind of let him down, I guess, now. Maybe not, though, you know, because I'm doing okay right now.
I think he'd be proud.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so, but if we can show someone, hey, there's a better way. So I tell people all the time, man, you can do this, you can do that. I love the New York story because I literally use that for everybody. Mm-hmm. Like, go to New York. And I'm saying, you can go there for $1,500. You will have the time of your life. I go, you can buy a package for like $150 and see 5 things. There's only $30 each place. It's nothing. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I go, because everyone wants to go to Hawaii or something. I said, go to Hawaii. Your ticket's $750. It's almost double. Your hotel's double. And I'm like, when I take my family, everything costs $500 to do anything. It's $500. You know,
I always call Target the $100 store, right?
Yeah. Or like Costco, you got to spend $350 or something. You know, so Hawaii for me is the $500 place. Like anything to do anything cost me $500 each time we did something. And I'm like, New York, you just go walk around and have a good time. Yeah. You know, you don't have to. It's like it's the best place to go for cheap. You know.
Well, you know, I think that's the great thing is there's so many things that when you go to a different place, it opens up a whole different world that, you know, you're exposed to. Mm-hmm. And it changes you because you leave and the stigma of what New York is. Or, you know, for me, when I was actually 15, my dad took me to, he had a work trip in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And he served in the military. He was in the Marines. And so, you know, part of where he served was in Washington. And so he said, hey, you know, if you want to come, you know, with me, you know, let's go. And I got to spend, you know, 5 days in Washington, D.C. with my dad. And you know, he went to this conference, but other than that, we were out just, you know, hiking, just walking around, and he was showing me everything. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever been to DC.
I haven't been there. We want to go there.
But that's one of those places that it changes the way you look at things. Just, you know, with, you know, you're literally walking down the road and you're like, that's the White House. Mm-hmm. You know, you think that it's, you know, it's all going to be separated. And, you know, like you're walking through a park and you don't see it, and you go down this little hill and it's a Vietnam memorial. You know, it just, you stumble across these things that are iconic. And, but him doing that made an impression at that time in my life. So what we made a decision to do with every kid, when they're 15 or 16, they get to pick a trip that anywhere they want to go. We say in the United States because we kind of put some parameters around it. Yeah. But let them not only pick it, but then they have to research it. They have to help find the hotel. They have to actually figure out the airfare. And all we do is just co-sign and we go with. Mm-hmm. And so my daughter, that's the trip to Chicago. She wanted to go to Chicago to go visit the art museum. She wanted to go see Hamilton. And so that's what we did. The 18-year-old son, he wanted to go to Washington, D.C. And so he and my wife, you know, we went together and we did the same thing. So it was kind of surreal.
Now, are you taking the one kid only, or
one kid only?
So it's like their thing.
Absolutely.
I kind of like that.
Yeah, because you know, so many times, you know, like in a big family, you get kind of, you know, lost in the shuffle or whatever.
Everyone gets to go because of this one kid's birthday or whatever.
Yeah, but the real conversations are when you're alone, you know, and you're having that time. And so, you know, and that's why, you know, I'd make a conscious decision to take, you know, my son to school, you know, is that, you know, it gives us some time in the windshield to just talk about different random things. Or every time, you know, I have him 50% of the time, and he's with his mom 50%. Every time when I pick him up, we go to Starbucks and we'll hang out and we just catch up. And it just, you know, sometimes it's an hour and a half, but it's just a chance for us to kind of connect as people. And I find out so much what's going on in his life just because, you know, if you don't, it's really hard to really get, you know, teenagers to open up about things. And so that trip is something that really, you find out a lot about what a kid's going through in junior high or high school by spending that much time with them.
I like that. So your hobbies, travel, you had spoke about you're into philosophy. You know, how does that look? You know, my daughter, so we moved her out of schools. You probably heard it on my other podcast. I don't know but she goes to a Great Heart School.
Yeah, the one with JJ. You guys were talking about that, right?
Yeah. So, and they're all about philosophy. that was one of the biggest things why I liked it. Because we had put them in one time in a Christian school, which we pulled them out. And then when we found Great Hearts, it was like, man, you know, when I got to see like the philosophers on the wall and you hear about this, because I didn't go to school, so I didn't even hear about them in school, you know, or read about them or read any of the books. And so I was like, you're gonna go here, like. And my wife was trying to show us all kinds of different schools, and I'm like, it's gonna come back to here. And I go, I know her. It's coming. And so we enroll. She goes to Great Hearts. And so when you said philosophy, I was like, man, like, I mean, how does that look in your life? How do you, you know, you're into philosophy, and how do you integrate that into your everyday living and into your business? You know, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, you know, it's, you know, one of the things, you know, and it kind of ties into the work-life balance scenario, is one of the things that I had learned was about, you know, mindfulness. Yeah. And it was something that, you know, I really struggled when people talked about meditating, because I would sit and try to meditate, and I have a very active mind. And I realized that, you know, how do I suck at doing nothing? You know, I mean, but you can. I mean, it's really hard, you know, to just sit and be present. And so I started learning about, you know, like how mindfulness is actually, from the health benefits and just the overall benefits of being able to be a lot more present. There's this author, John Kabat-Zinn, and he actually has really instituted mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is called MBSR. And he's a doctor who's really helped bring mindfulness and meditation to the forefront. And it helped normalize it. Before that, you know, I kind of felt like I was, like, if I did it, I was kind of a freak. And I, you know, maybe I was unpacking some stuff from, you know, my parents being Catholic. I'm like, well, does this like mean that I'm, you know, subscribing to some other religion? It wasn't. It was just a matter of being like, you know, cut all that stuff away. Is how can I just slow down my mind, and how can I become more present, and really figure out how to understand how I show up, and being able to be here, as opposed to, you know, us doing this podcast and I'm already thinking about the next thing I have to do, or stressed about, you know, how, you know, morning went, right?
Yeah.
You know, the reality is we're here now, and that's good enough. And so it started this exploration about different philosophies, and all the way from, you know, you study Buddhism and, you know, Taoism, and you look at, you know, things that, you know, Jesus taught, and, you know, all the way through, there's this common thread that they all talk about. And so, you know, you can strip religiousness out of things, but you really look at it as, okay, what was the core tenets of what Jesus was talking about, or, you know, Buddha was talking about? And I think that's fascinating, because, you know, they always say success leaves clues, right? And so then this idea of Stoicism, you know, again, something I studied when I was in college, you know, and I was like, philosophy, right? And at the time, I didn't know it was going to actually something that would stick. But, you know, but you start reading about these philosophers, and they really help, you know, like Marcus Aurelius, you know, and, you know, how he was one of the great leaders of the Roman Empire, but he was, you know, he was so minimal in his own personal life. You know, he really just focused on, you know, how he could be, you know, a great person, have his own personal ethics, and being, you know, somebody who wasn't swayed by, you know, money or corruption. You know, and then there's, you know, people like, man, I have to dig into like Seneca or Diogenes, and some of these people who really help shape thought and culture. I think it's fascinating. And then, you know, I think that as you keep going down the line, there's great thinkers like, you know, I read a book when I was in high school, and it was Walden by Henry David Thoreau. And at the time, I thought, you know, it's all about nature and stuff. I revisited the book when I was out of college, and it was a whole different, I'd grown up, and I was able to listen to what it actually was talking about. And it was fascinating. And so the cool thing with Thoreau is that when he was writing about his experience at Walden, he was incarcerated or put in jail because he didn't want to pay a tax for a war that he didn't believe in. And so in that experience, he wrote this book called Civil Disobedience. And Civil Disobedience became the book of the civil rights movement, that Martin Luther King used that thought concept that people should be, put in jail if they believe that they're doing it for a just cause. Gandhi did the same thing. And, you think about, what, Dr. King was able to do, Gandhi. And so a lot of these movements have been shaped from original philosophy that a lot of people just think that they learn in school, but somehow it all resonates. And so I think it's fun to start looking back and, seeing how all these, dots connect.
Yeah.
And, especially being, now I'm at least older than almost all these people who had lived. And so you're understanding kind of their place and how they were able to understand it. So I just think philosophy and I try to find inspiration from anything outside of leadership books. You and I were chatting about that.
Yeah.
Everything's been written.
Yeah.
It's just packaged up a different way. I'll read, I can speed read and I can go through books. I'll go through audiobooks, but there's always one or two good ideas, but they have to write 200 pages and just bludgeon it to death because they have to be able to, move books. Right. Or it's people who are like, hey, look, I'm actually I want to be a keynote speaker. So I'm just going to have a book. It makes me a credibility indicator.
Yeah.
So many of these books are just, filler, but if you can distill the few things that are in those books, and if it applies to you and to how if you think, yeah, this is something that I can, take, great. If not, there's been some books where I just put down halfway through and I'm like, nope.
Yeah. Is it what's inside, or is it, because how it's packaged, right, is like the delivery of the context that's within the book. It's kind of like a restaurant or something, like, or a product, right? You see the two same products and one's packaged a little bit different and it's just that much more better. Yeah. What are some books you recommend for philosophy for anyone listening? What are some good ones, or maybe one or two?
Oh man.
If you can remember.
Yeah. There's Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. For nonconformity, I love Thoreau and Walden. Yeah. There's a lot of things in there that, he kind of goes off, but some of the core tenets of what he talks about is just, mind blowing. You just have to get into what he's saying. But all the way to, it's, even if you look at what, you talk about reading the Bible, right? If you unpack it, there's a lot of things that Jesus talked about, and how cool is it that if what Jesus was able to do without social media, without writing anything down, he was a couch surfer, he didn't even own a house, he just traveled to and from.
Yeah, he traveled.
So it was the importance of the message. And, and that's where, you think about where, going back to Martin Luther King, is, people went to listen to his I Have a Dream speech because they were inspired, and I think Simon Sinek said they didn't show up because he had a 5-step plan. Yeah. Is he had a dream, and people could buy into that dream.
When they were ready for it. Yeah. They needed it at the time. He was the right person at the right time.
Absolutely.
Simon Sinek is pretty good. Who are some guys like today you would say is maybe not philosopher, because that's an old term type thing. They study philosophy, but I guess there's philosophers today, but who are some guys that you would say that are popular, that are pretty good in their approach and their speech and what's coming out of their mouth? Sometimes it gets weird because they run out of stuff to say, and they're kind of going like this all over the place, But who are some good guys today?
The person who I just read his book, and it's Rick. He was the founder of Def Jam Records. Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin.
Yeah. So Rick Rubin has, he was the founder of Def Jam Records. He and Russell Simmons. And if you see Rick Rubin, he's this kind of big white guy with a big beard, and he was one of the foremost influencers in all of rap music and hip hop. He was the one who helped, discover the Beastie Boys, Run DMC. He's the one who figured out how to put it all together. Well, the one thing there you go. There's Rick Rubin.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, you look at him and you're like, okay, well, you know, what's the deal? Now, all the great musicians go to him, and they'll have, you know, he'll help them write a song. He'll help them produce an album. The cool thing with him is that he'll be in the studio and he'll just be laying in the corner, and he's just listening, and he's just listening for something unique. And people are like, wait, I'm paying this guy a lot of money to just lay there in the corner, you know, or he's just sitting there with his legs crossed, you know, it looks like he's meditating, not even paying attention, but he's listening. But he has such a keen ear for what talent is. And it doesn't matter, who the musical artist is, but there's, you know, certain albums that I'll listen to, where I had no idea he had the influence on it. But
because you're an 80s kid.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was born in 74.
You're born 70s, but you're an 80s kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think the thing that's fascinating with him is that once you start reading about, you know, his overall approach and philosophy, he is remarkably successful. And his thing is that he just understands how to bring great talent together and really give it to the world. Yeah. And, you know, he really has a great philosophy right now that is resonating. And he actually said everybody wanted him to write a biography. And it was like, oh yeah, you need to write the biography. And he's like, I don't want to write a biography. I have no interest in writing a biography. But what he did say is, I want to write a book I want to write. And nobody wanted it. Nobody. And so it took him 5 years to write this book. And he was like, you know, I believe this is what, you know, my truth is, and I'm going to share it. And it was all about art. And it was all about creativity and everything that is not the music business. But he would use examples of working with, an artist. And so it was interesting. It was kind of, you know, it tied in some of his experiences. And now it's one of the national bestsellers. And, you know, the person who produced it is very thankful that he did, because he stuck to his ideals and his truth, even though when everybody else was saying this isn't what we want.
Yeah, because they wanted all the rappers in the book.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah. Oh, they wanted the juicy stories, you know.
Yeah, they wanted... But I think, like you're saying, is I'll probably get it on Audible. Is it on Audible?
Yeah.
Because I do that for my life is I do it a lot downstairs even. I'll stop and I'll tell a story to everybody. Mm-hmm. Like I'll literally stop. There's not a big office, but I'll stop everybody and tell them a story and how it led to that moment right there. Like if I heard something happen, I'll be like, man, I remember when it was, you know, it was like 12 years ago and this and that, because everything, if you're paying attention in life, it correlates. Like, and there's like, we're going through something because it's preparing us for something else. If we use it,
yeah.
You know, if we can, you know, then that's how you can grab on something and say, oh man, I remember this. Oh man, I remember that. You know, I was able to do that. What's funny is I do that with my life now is I'll use scenarios, of how I want to live or how I want to teach and if I can give someone a nugget, whatever it is, right? And so there are a couple of things is, you know, like when I started coming up in construction, and I was able to do that with construction as well. Because I would go and I would visually see different buildings and different techniques. And this is as I was just coming up, and I was on drugs till I was 23. And I would go home, I would draw all night, all morning, because I didn't sleep. And then later on, when as I was cleaned up, now I'm building, you know, I'm foreman, superintendent roles, building these buildings. I was able to correlate back to when I seen something and take that image and that process, whatever, and bring it into my world, right? And explain, like, and it gives an example of why I'm able to do that. Right? Because we can look back at everything, right? So the other day, we did, and the experience is what helped, one experience helped us create another experience, right? And we built a house and I put like a small sports court in the backyard. And I really wanted this thing. There's a few things that I wanted in this house because it was like, there was a moment in time, like where this happened and that happened, like throughout the house. And I can explain it when I walk through the house or whatever. And so the court, and I was telling my wife, and I never told her, but I go, you know, like when we built this court, I go, I was outside, and I go, and the reason why I did this is because when I was real little, so I was given, my mom, like kind of gave me up to, I was adopted. I was given up. That's right before I turned 8. And so about 5 years old, I started going with my sister's dad to his family. He would pick up my sister, and I didn't have a dad at the time. And so I would cry to go with him. And I ended up becoming close with him. His name was Paul. Anyway, so I would go with his family. And so he had his brother, a couple of his brothers were doing better than everyone. And one in particular, he had built a house. And it was in South Phoenix. This is in the 80s. Right, so built a custom home in South Phoenix, off the mountain, right off the South Mountain. There was all orchards and stuff like that, and so he put the pool so everyone could swim, and he put a court so everyone could play basketball. And every time there was a gathering, either everyone was swimming or everyone was playing basketball. And I told her, I go, everyone was playing basketball. I go, I was 6, 7, 8 years old playing with my uncles that were 30, 40, playing with their kids that were 20, and it was all these age groups that were able to come together and have fun. And so I said, I want to create that same memory today.
How cool is that?
So it's like, which is like with him is he was able to take something that happened here, bring it over here, and create this music. And in his world, it's music. In my world, I guess it could be music, but it's life experiences. So someone, again, we're back to how people can do that in their lives, is like, take an experience that you may have liked and recreate it in your own life, or teach someone else how to create it in their lives, right? And that's sowing seeds. That's giving back. It'll grow. You know what I mean?
Well, and by doing that, you're intentionally putting those seeds now. You're not even reaping the benefits fully yet, because wait until your grandkids start showing up there.
Yeah.
And they want to bring the kids over so they can go do this.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be spouses that will come with it, and then their friends, and so at some point you're going to look back and say, wow, I did this, I'm having this experience now. But when you look back in its totality in 20, 30 years, you're going to say, that was an investment.
Yeah.
That was the right investment to make.
And so basically, like, we're all kind of a philosopher in our own life. It's whether we want to keep telling the story, if we want the story to keep going. And those are those experiences. Because the philosopher is telling us an experience. They're explaining it, right? And how do you live, and how you become one, how you suppress, all these things are experiences, right? And they're telling us their experiences. And so we can do that as well as in our own stories, tell our experiences. The question is, what experience do you want to tell, a good or bad one, right?
Some of the best experiences that I've had in my life is when I stopped. When I stopped what I was doing in the flow of life, and just took a minute. And one of them, I haven't thought about this in a while, but just was when I was in high school. I was staying after. And it was the end of the day, and I was going down the stairwell, and I had been going up and down the stairwell for all of high school. And there was a quote on the wall, and it said, "A loyalty to a petrified opinion never broke a single chain nor freed a human soul." And it was by Mark Twain. And I read it, and I literally just stopped in my tracks. I was like, And, I was kind of Joe Jock, right? And I wasn't known as being an intellectual giant. I definitely partied a little bit too much and was a jock. But I sat there and I stopped, and people were kind of coming up and down the stairs, and I just sat there and it was really kind of like meditated on what that thought was, and it's still to this day I use that quote, because a loyalty to a petrified opinion. I mean, if you're so embedded in what that it is, think about politics, right? It's like, I am this. And so you're not open to anything else, then it frees you, or, it makes it so you can't open yourself up to other things. And so, the idea is it didn't break a chain, which is the chains of society and conformity, or free the human soul. And so it was me just stopping one day and being like, and it was this moment where I realize that sometimes when things are at the most chaotic is that you stop. And there's been times where I've stopped and just watched the world go by for 5 minutes. Or if I'm in between meetings, where my office is, I can see planes coming in and out of Sky Harbor, and we're just south of the airport. And once in a while, I'll just sit for a minute and just kind of transition to the next thing. And what it does is sometimes like we're in this high speed, where we got to go.
Yeah.
And it's all about productivity. And where I find that I'm best is when I do have time and space. That book I was telling you about. You need margin in your life. You need margin to be able to think creatively. And so sometimes what I'll do is if we're going into business planning, if we're going into a real challenge, I always say, you know what, I'll think of it, and then I'll sit on it, and sometimes I'll say, help me, figure out like maybe what the challenge is for this, or people sometimes come say, well, hey, we need an answer, and I'm really good at giving a quick answer. Might not be the most thought out one, but I can give them an answer. But sometimes just being like, let me think about it and let me get back with you. I'll, give me an hour. And sometimes just even having an hour, I'll process some questions that I wouldn't ask before, and then say, well, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And so I try to talk to, young people coming up and saying like, it's okay to take a deep breath, or, go eat lunch by yourself, go to a movie by yourself, and I love to go walk. Like there's a nature preserve in the, where I live. It's just right out the back. And I try to walk, at least 2 or 3 days a week out there. And, I'd always listen to music. Now I don't even listen to music. Even, driving over here, didn't even have the radio on, and that's what I challenge people. I say, well, drive without the radio on and you'll find out where your thoughts are. But when you're sitting at a stoplight, you'll listen to people who are listening to music, they're singing along or whatever, but everybody's just filling the gap. But just to be able to sit at a stoplight and watch a world go by, you notice things around you. And that's what like philosophers, comedians are really good at, is noticing something that nobody else is paying attention to, and then actually just doing something with that. And so what I've discovered is a value for me as a leader is to bring that of, instead of saying, hey, I have the answers, right? It's listening to what somebody says and say, hey, have you thought about this? Or trying to draw it out of them and just being patient and slowing down.
Yeah.
And I don't always get it right, but it's I think that's one thing that everybody wants a quick fix. And the first thing I'll say is just find time to slow down through the course of a day and you'll be more effective.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's the same thing. I'm learning that process right now. And kind of what I tell people is like, take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Yeah, because we're so in depth in what the conversation or the issue or whatever it is. We're like in there. You can't see anything. Then when you got a team, you got noise coming from everywhere, right? Yeah. And you can't even think because there's so many things going on, right? And so I like that you do that. Is like pull away, which is kind of pull away, find a quiet space, decompress, and then you come back with some strength, rather than making a real harsh, a bad decision. Because I make a lot of fast decisions too, and like you said, sometimes leaders make more mistakes than anyone else because you're making more decisions than anyone else.
Yeah,
Well,
there's a adage, surround yourself around people who are smarter than you.
Yeah,
and I the reason why I don't work is I get to work around people who are phenomenal. Like I look at, my leadership team and they're all better at what they do than I am.
That's awesome.
And I love that because, we'll, bring that in and people will be able to talk about like, oh, hey, this is what, here's what I'm proposing. Great. And so if you can create an environment where people, can be trusted and people are going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Actually, I just talked to our Jay, who's our VP of operations, about this today. I gave him a video to watch. It was about Mike McDaniel. He's the quarterback the head coach for the Miami Dolphins.
Okay.
It was this great video that Rich Eisen has. If you ever get a chance, just Google Rich Eisen or YouTube it, and about Mike McDaniel. And Mike McDaniel is this coach that is a lot different than all the other coaches. I mean, his philosophy is different. He's looking at things in the NFL and doing things that no other coach has done. And so it's interesting because a couple weeks ago, or on Friday, they were playing the Jets, and Tua, who's our quarterback, threw 2 interceptions back to back, just ugly interceptions right before halftime. And Mike McDaniel, he comes run over and he's like, "Hey man, keep throwing it, keep going." He's like, "We believe in you. You've got this." And by the time that he came out, he just lit it up and he did great the rest of the half. The juxtaposition of that is, my wife's a big Ohio State fan, and they lost to Michigan, which is like, it was like a day of mourning in our house. Like, and that's like my son Zach, he's like hardcore into, Buckeye football. And the difference was their quarterback started the game talking about, we can't fail, and his prep talk was, we can't fail. No matter what, we can't make mistakes. No matter, we can't make any mistakes. And so everybody was playing tight. And so the first mistake that he made, he goes over to the head coach, and Ryan Day is our head coach, and he's a great coach. But he says, "What in the F are you doing out there?" And you could just see his shoulders slump. And I was like, "Oh man." And he just struggled the rest of the day. And, the difference between 2 head coaches having the same exact experience of a quarterback throwing an interception, but one person saying, "Yeah, you're going to make mistakes." Yep. But you need to accept that those mistakes will happen. It's how you recover those mistakes.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, you make one mistake and then, you know how it is. Somebody, you get on them about something and they just crumble, and it's just like, they start making more and more.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the, an interesting thing about, you look around at all the different things that are, if it's sports or if it's philosophy or any of those things, a lot of those examples on leadership, they manifest themselves in different areas. And that's what I think it's nice to be able to see is, where those things come up.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we start to wrap up a little bit, let's get back into some of the construction stuff. What are you seeing? We're ending the year, right? The economy's been crazy. It's, it's just all over the place. What do you see in 2024? What are you guys are a big national company. I don't know how many states is WU in?
We have 5 regional offices, and then we have a lot of other offices within those regions. Like we have Phoenix and an office in Tucson. So
yeah. So what are you guys seeing? Which projections with as far as building, as far as business wise? What are you seeing?
Record year.
2024.
Well, this year is we've as a company we've hit our high point. Next year is actually going to be even bigger. And
okay.
we're going to grow almost 40% here in Arizona, or 48% actually. And but I think it's a good example of our industry is a lagging industry.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of backlog and a lot of projects that just started, and so a lot of our work is going to go all the way through 2024 and part of 25. So if I read the tea leaves, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, things are great, right? But the reality is the market is, and most economists are saying is like we're going to see a downturn, and part of it is we're already seeing it with financing. Think about interest rates. Anything that is privately funded or it's reliant on interest rates are going to have a big impact. Just so many deals are not even moving forward, and so what we're doing is we look at talking about who our ideal client is, but also is, hey, can these clients, what kind of funding sources do they have? And so we're having to drill down and say, do they have alternative sources of funding? If there's different ways that they make, they get it through bond funds or through, different sources and uses of capital, then it might have a little bit more resiliency and those deals will move forward. But if you see like a multifamily deal right now, and it's going to be just a traditional construction loan, the difference in a cost between when interest rates were 3% versus, construction loans are over 10%.
It's the payments double.
Oh yeah. And so it's really forced a lot of work to just stop. And so, all the work that is under construction is moving forward, but there's finally going to be this time where things are really going to slow down. And I think it's a good thing for Arizona. I'll talk about that because, during 2008, we were at the high point in revenue as a state. It was like $20-some billion in construction. And this last year, we hit that same high point. So we're putting just as much in place as we were before. Now, it's not indexed for inflation. But the interesting thing is our industry, there's only 75% of the people who are in our industry left. And so it's fascinating because you have people who our workers who are having to do more and deliver more, but there's not enough people. I mean, 4 to 1 people are retiring out of the industry versus coming in. And so I think things have been good for people, but I think what we're going to see is a correction in, we're already seeing it across the country. Arizona was probably the last one to kind of start feeling the effects. And I think we might be one of the first ones out. Whereas if you look at 2008, it was totally opposite. We were the first ones in and the last ones out. So in some ways, I think it's going to normalize our labor market, and to a certain extent, but maybe create more competition again for in the industry. But I think overall, people are out shopping. They are spending.
Well, they're spending all the money's being spent that was given.
Well, yeah, I mean that's
and the money they sold their houses and made $200-300 grand. That's all being spent right now.
Absolutely, and then that's the interesting thing is, what's behind that then, and I think you start seeing where realtors are having a hard time keeping their jobs, mortgage companies are laying people off, we're seeing banks laying people off, and so it's there are the canary in the coal mine is out there. We see architectural billings going down. And so something I always track is the architectural billing index. And it shows how much billings that architects are doing. And, if architects slow down, we're going to slow down about 6 months to 9 months later. And so they're already starting to slow down. So the overall goal, that we look at is, trying to, the quality of the deals. We're trying to underwrite and look at, okay, how is this project going to be funded? We're talking to the owner, because if we have 4 projects that they're asking us to bid, instead of going after all 4,
who's the strongest?
Is that we'll say this one we think is going to move forward, because it has public funding or it has alternative funding. Whereas another one, you just know there's no way. But our trade partners have no line of sight in that.
I mean, we see it so me personally, I don't know about anyone else, but so, like right now what we're seeing is, so we go on job walks, right? Bidding and stuff like that. And we're starting to see more and more sub trades at these job walks where there would have been, say, 3 drywall guys, 3 plumbing guys. Now there's 8, there's 10, where we're seeing, and this is happening a lot in the TI space, which is telling me that because there's some big projects still going on, but that mid-level project, those are slim pickings. So that customer's going down, or that subcontractor or contractor is going down to the lower level of the TI space. The TI space is getting bombarded right now. So we see that, we're seeing that. But with the houses. So if you think about this, I was just thinking about it, is everyone refinanced their house. They didn't refinance, sold their house, right? They're in a real low interest rate at kind of a higher value, not crazy high, but higher value. So they're in a lower interest rate. They kind of lock themselves for the next 15, 20 years because there's no way they're going to get that interest rate again. And mentally, they're stuck.
Absolutely.
They're like, I'm only paying $1,800. Well, you just stuck yourself. You're never going to sell your house because you're stuck on a payment. So they really just shackle themselves, right? Rather because now for us is we've been moving up every time with the houses and whatever it is, and so a lot of people have really just put shackles on themselves because they're kind of stuck. They're stuck for a while.
Well, and that's. That's why we are starting to see a surge, starting to move forward with single family homes again, because there's nobody wants to move. Everybody recognizes that thing. And then, and that's why multifamily is continuing to grow, and the need for affordable housing here in the state is immense.
I think I want to get into that.
Oh, absolutely. Because it's something that I've been passionate about for my whole career. My dad actually, in his career, he did affordable housing as well as part. He also did hospitals and other things. But yeah, 18 years ago is I started doing affordable housing. Did the Matthew Henson Hope 6 project in downtown Phoenix off of Buckeye and 7th, and just got to see how much it changed that community. And then
was that 18 years ago when they remodeled that area?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The crazy thing about it is I know I've been in the industry long enough because after 15 years, they re-syndicate the tax credits.
Yeah.
And, they were asking us about, okay, well, hey, when we re-syndicate, do you want to do it again? It's like, wow. But I think that it's, there's such an important facet to, affordable housing. And I think the one thing that's kind of cool is, we talk about politics, and you have the right and the left, and they're polar apart. But affordable housing tax credits is something that every year they've agreed on. It was actually a program by Ronald Reagan, and it started in 1986, and it's always stayed active.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because corporations get to offset their tax liability, and there's a public good. So it really is one of the things that works in Washington.
Yeah.
And that's why I always say is, hey, it's there's a good for both. And it is, because there's a lot of these, big companies who want to invest in their communities, and they want to be able to do things that will impact the community. And so, having to be able to build all of these tax credit projects, I love it. We just broke ground, a couple weeks ago on a project in the Garfield district, and it's fascinating. We had people like Ruben Gallego, he was there. All the way to different dignitaries, but Department of Housing.
Where's the project at?
It's over off of 16th in Portland, so right over by the I-10 runs just north of it. And ironically enough, is I worked on that project in the first phase in 2013, 2014, and so we did an adaptive reuse of a building and added some units. And it was for veterans housing. And it was...
Is it the old historic building?
Yeah. Yeah, the one with the green roof.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, seeing how much it's made an impact. And I've worked with that developer for my whole career, ever since Matthew Henson. We basically do every deal together. And he started talking to me about, hey, there's going to be a phase 2 coming. And, so over the last 5 years, we've been working together on this phase 2, and we finally broke ground on that one.
Oh, that's awesome.
But, yeah. So it's, again, it's 60 units, but, you take, overall 60 units here, we're doing project in Apache Junction. We're doing projects in Scottsdale and in Phoenix. And, it suddenly, there's a soul to it.
Yeah.
And that's what I like is that they had a meeting today, and I jumped in the meeting and just, said, this is why we do what we do. Is if you think the groundbreaking was really cool, wait until we do the ribbon cutting, because that is where the rubber meets the road. You actually see people who are going to be moving into these facilities and getting a chance to have something that's stable in their life.
Yeah.
And if they have stable housing, as long as they take care of their stuff, they have a place where they're secure. And having a place where people can be secure, then it creates all these other things. And it was fascinating to hear stories from different people who've actually lived in affordable housing, and now that people have talked about, like, hey, I finally had a place that was home, a community, and I thrived, and I went to college, and and I was able to do big things in my career because of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why I like to be a part of it. If you drive by, it just looks like another multifamily project versus another one, but it has soul to it, and that's, to me, it's far more important. It's something that I'm passionate about. And, my wife, is, kind enough. She sends me articles on it and stuff because, she just knows it's, of all the things that we build, retail's great.
Yeah.
But, I like building, things like healthcare or senior living. I like education. I like, universities, things that are really helping the community. I built a jail one time, and this is the last time. Like the idea of building something to incarcerate people, and no, I mean, I can't make it up. The owner was so excited about the different colors of gray that he could have, And then the most energetic I saw him was how he could gas the inmates and the areas where you can shoot people from, in the jail
or whatever.
Yeah. And they were talking about this, like, this guy was like as dull as they got. And he started lighting up talking about, hey, we can send gas in here. And I was like, man, there's got to be a better way to make a living. And I'll let other people build prisons and jails. And
you know what I would like to do is, because I grew up in the programs and stuff, there's good and bad. You know, some people take advantage of them. But I would like to take and, because in our church, we do outreaches and we do a lot of homeless stuff. But I would like to take where we could take people before they get homeless and train them and equip them and teach them how to become entrepreneurs. That's what I would like. Because like entrepreneurship, capitalism for me, maybe not everyone else, is really important in my life. You know what I mean? It's allowed me to do a lot of things. And so I would love to and the whole affordable housing for me is to say, okay, is like if I was to do it, say I was an owner of one, I'd want to create a program where, hey, this is just a step. This is not your landing point. This is a step to the next step. How can we get you in here and out of here in 1 year? Not like 3 generations. That's where we got to make the changes. So I would love to be a part of how do we teach these people to get to the next level? You know what I mean? So,
well, that people sometimes just need a shot, they just need, an opportunity to do it. And, it's so myopic when people are like, oh, well, they should just pull themselves up by the bootstraps and, they should just figure it out. Well, the schools that they go to or the environment that they're around, you're trying to grow a flower on a rock, it's, you're not going to, have, it's really tough. And so, but I think so much has been focused on universities and colleges. And I think that way of thinking got us to a certain point, but we have to break that thinking and look at now, like you said, is, there's a lot of people college isn't for. So, and that's okay. But teaching people how to, follow something they're passionate about, create a business and be able to not only create something that's self-sustaining, but also then create something that creates, a livelihood for other families, and that's a responsibility that I take as a leader. Is now I know, we've got 52 employees here in Arizona, and my responsibility is, hey, making sure that, they have the best environment to thrive, but also that, they're able to not go home and want to kick the dog. They want to go home and actually participate with their kids in sports or be a coach or, go to that dance recital, because, so much of what we try to do is say there's one path. Yeah. And that's the challenge is, I think, hopefully, through COVID, there's all these reluctant entrepreneurs. Yeah. And people who just didn't know what they want to do, so they started their own thing. And I think that's something where, that those kind of people have grit, they have, hustle. And just because you have a college degree, there's a lot of people who have college degrees that are sitting in their parents' basement or, serving, coffee or doing other things, and they're not doing anything with that degree. So there's no guarantee that, hey, having one is going to get you to, a certain level of success. I know it wasn't with me. I mean, my degree, ironically enough, is I last of 5 kids. I was paying for college out of my own pocket, so I was just in that grind, and I was going to do exercise sports science and sports medicine. And that whole idea of science and medicine, I wasn't built that way. Chemistry pretty much washed me out of that. Yeah. But I decided to get a liberal arts degree. And through that, I was able to get a minor in construction management. And so I basically took all the construction management classes, but none of the engineering. And all the people around me were like, oh, you're never going to get a job that way. I'm like, probably not, but it's interesting to me. But during that time, I also took history classes. I took sociology classes. I took banking and financing classes. I took philosophy. So I took all these other classes. And when I graduated, I didn't know if I was going to get a job. I had multiple job offers. I guess I interviewed well. And what I learned in the job is everything that I needed, but I have this insatiable appetite to learn. And so I was willing to keep raising my hand and asking questions. And what I discovered through my career is the thing that I thought I was weakest at is I didn't have the construction management degree.
Yeah.
Became my biggest competitive advantage is because I think different. I act different. I bring different things in. You know, I look at history and how history shapes, you know, the future. And now I discovered is like, wow, like if I didn't go down that route, then I wouldn't have been able to probably be the same person or leader or person in my family that I would have been.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think, you know, I always just, you know, people are limited by fear. And maybe, you know, I know we're wrapping up, but I will say this is, you know, when we talked about therapy, I hit a wall in my career, and that wall was because everything that made me successful, like when I was in playing sports or in school, it was my fear of failure. I was so scared to fail. So I just keep grinding through it. Yeah. And it became normal, and that's the way I operated. It was just my fear of failure, and they kept driving me. But then I finally burned out, you know, and I, not only did I burn out, I had a drinking problem. You know? I would binge drink, and you know, I started drinking when I was off and on when I was in 6th grade, kind of like what you talked about. And, but what I discovered is I topped out as what I could do because, you know, the foundation I had was built on fear, and I wasn't really dealing with the right stuff. Yep. So I've been sober for 8 years, and
that's nice.
Yeah. And, you know, and really, it's something that, you know, by doing that, I also discovered that, hey, I can't be focused on fear anymore. What I have to do is, you know, kind of, and it's really like changing my operating system. Yeah. But it was about, you know, what is it that I wanted to get out of the next chapter of my life? And it was about love, being passionate about what I do, and just being authentic and being, you know, fully transparent in my life and not being afraid of that. And by doing that, it's completely changed the way my life has gone. And I regret so much that I didn't have the foresight beforehand, but I had to go through all that. You know, I had to go through the pipes of Shawshank Redemption, right? You know, to get to where I needed to be. And that's where when people are like, oh, well, it's probably easy for you. Here's what it is. And I'm like, no, like, you know, I've gone through, you know, the life struggles. You know, I've had a brother who died of cancer. I lost my parents, you know, and it's like, you know, we all have things in our life, but at some point people stop and they identify with those traumas and they don't move past it. And, you know, my advice for all your listeners is that traumas never go away. So the more that you just figure out how to resolve them and embrace them, then it frees you up so you can do great things.
Yeah. I mean, I like you said basically is you changed from a fear-based mindset, which is the defensive mindset, and went on the offense and said, I'm going to win. I'm going to win every area of my life. I'm going to stack the wins, and I'm going to keep winning. And the wins don't always look pretty, right? And while you're winning, it's like a team, right? They're going to win, but they're also going to lose, right? But you focus on winning. You know, the team doesn't go, hey, we're going to lose today, guys. No, we're going to win. And focus on winning. You know, it's the same thing with someone who's like tries to go for one of my biggest faults when I was younger, is I always wanted to be like something perfect, and that was a roadblock for me. Is because the striving for perfection left me stuck at a dead end. I couldn't go further because if it wasn't a perfect scenario, I wasn't doing it. Yeah. You know, so it wasn't until I realized, well, nothing's going to be perfect. Let's just do it. Let's just go for the win. You know, screw the loss. Like we'll handle that when we get there. But let's look at the win. Let's prepare for the win, just like a team. Let's prepare for the win. Let's go after the win. If we take the L, okay, well, let's keep practicing to get that win. You know what I mean? So Bryan, I go ahead.
Taking time to celebrate those wins.
That's key. That's key. Celebrate. So I mean, I want to thank you for your time. If there's one thing you could tell that young leader in you know our construction world or any other industry, what would that one thing you tell them as they trying to advance their life or their career or whatnot?
You know, really spending the time to understand where your values are, and once you understand what your values are, and as a person, it resonates in your business. And if it's that, hey, look, you're going to do things in an ethical, above board manner as a PM, or say if you're doing that in your personal life, you should be doing it as a project manager, and to the point where, holding yourself to the highest level of accountability that even where nobody else is measuring you to, but you do that because, it's fundamentally who you are.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of people get derailed in their careers because of trying to take the fast pass through it. And, to me, they see the things that they want, and they think it might be this car, it might be this house or whatever. And, it's all good, but when you look at it, it's all stuff that can be taken away. And, one of the things that, I've always have said is that you come in this world naked and you leave this world naked, and everything else is borrowed.
Yeah.
And, the reality is that's it is, what is the legacy that you're going to leave others, and what's the impact that you're going to have? Because it's not the stuff you're going to give or money that you're going to give when you're gone. It's really how are people going to say my life is better by having that person in it, and really be able to celebrate, who you are, and they can live through you as a person.
Yeah. So there it is, guys. Bryan Dunn, think about this. What are your values? What's the legacy you're living? Are you winning in life? If not, it's time to start. Be blessed.